Hospitalizations, canceled tours, long silences on social media, emotional comebacks, and millions of people commenting on every step she takes. For years, Selena Gomez was presented as the perfect Disney girl, then as a global pop star, and later as a fragile celebrity always on the edge of disappearing from the stage. For some, her story is that of a sensitive artist who couldn't handle the pressure. But for others, it's the story of someone who was pushed too far, too fast, and for far too long. But there is something that almost always comes up when people talk about her life, her crises, her pauses, her changes, but those things never appeared out of nowhere. Before starting her story from the beginning, there is something worth talking about first, because if there is one relationship that marked a before and after in Selena's life, if there is one story that condensed fame, pressure, exposure, and emotional pain like few others, that was her relationship with Justin Bieber.
It's a tie, Drake and Justin Bieber featuring Usher.
Selena, nice to meet you. I'm Justin. You're very beautiful. Maybe we can go out sometime. Okay.
And to understand Selena Gomez today, we first have to understand what happened there. Selena and Justin were not just another pop couple. They were the pop couple. Young, famous, beautiful, successful. Idols of an entire generation that grew up watching every photo, every fight, and every reunion. At first, the story seemed like a classic fairy tale. Two teenage stars meeting at the top of the world. But very quickly, the relationship turned into a cycle of breakups, reunions, and emotional exhaustion. Every separation was world news. Every reunion, a trending topic. And every conflict, material for headlines, theories, and public judgment. Selena always seemed to end up in the same place. The one who waited, the one who forgave, and the one who tried again. Meanwhile, Justin became more and more erratic, more chaotic, and more unpredictable. Problems with the law, public scandals, changes in behavior, a career spinning out of control. And Selena was there, in the middle of all that, not only as a partner, but as emotional support. Over time, the relationship stopped being just a complicated love story. It started to look like a constant source of stress, anxiety, and psychological wear. When they finally broke up for good, something in Selena never went back to being the same. She didn't just lose a relationship, she lost part of her emotional stability. And, inevitably, she was once again exposed in front of a world that comments, judges, and simplifies everything. Many fans over time ended up saying the same thing. That relationship wasn't just a failed love story. It was a wound that took years to close. And when it seemed that this endless story was finally fading away, another key figure appears, Hailey Baldwin, first as just another name around Justin, then as an increasingly constant presence, and finally as the person who ends up taking the place that for years had belonged to Selena. For the public, the change was brutal. Justin goes from a chaotic, media-driven relationship to a fast, almost unexpected marriage, and Selena is left once again on the outside of a story that still hadn't fully closed emotionally. The comparisons begin, the theories explode, social media fills with side speculation and judgment. And although no real relationship can be summed up in headlines, the truth is that this turn marks a definitive ending. Not just for the couple, also for an entire chapter in Selena's life. From that point on, there is no turning back, and the emotional blow is enormous. And now, to understand why all of this weighed so much, we have to go a little further back. Selena Gomez grows up inside the Disney system. From a very young age, her life revolves around castings, film sets, cameras, and expectations. Success arrives very early, probably too early. Wizards of Waverly Place turns her into a familiar face all over the world. And like what happens to many Disney kids, her image becomes tied to an idea: the good girl, the polite one, always smiling, always available. But growing up under that model has a cost. Very little privacy, very little normal life, a lot of pressure to never make mistakes. When she makes the jump to music, the phenomenon only grows. Selena is no longer just a young actress, she is now a global pop star. And with that comes something inevitable: more exposure, more demands, and of course, more public judgment. But before we continue, I'd like to tell you 3 things that prove something wasn't right. 1. From a very young age, Selena lived under constant pressure about her image, her body, and her behavior. Every physical change, every decision, every silence was analyzed in public. 2. Her career never had real breaks. Projects, tours, promotions, interviews. Rest was not an option, it was a threat to the machine. 3. Even in her best moments, there were always rumors about her health, her stability, and her environment. Fame didn't just show her to the world, it also kept watch over her. Over the years, something more serious begins to appear: health problems. Selena is diagnosed with lupus, an autoimmune disease that completely changes her relationship with work, with her body, and with her public image. It's no longer just about schedules, contracts, or expectations. It's about being able to get out of bed, about having energy, about not putting her own life at risk. The illness forces her to slow down, to cancel tours, to disappear from the public spotlight for periods of time. Then come the hospitalizations, the long treatments, the kidney transplant, and around all of that, silence. For the public, those absences were mysterious. For her, they were a matter of survival. While the world kept demanding songs, interviews, and appearances, her body was asking for something else: pause, time, and self-care. On top of that, anxiety, depression, and emotional exhaustion start to pile up. The pressure doesn't ease, the exposure doesn't stop, and every comeback is celebrated, but also demanded, as if nothing had ever happened. There's a permanent contradiction. When she returns, she's applauded. When she stops, she's questioned, as if being sick were a weakness that needs public justification. Little by little, Selena starts talking about mental health, about limits, about the need to stop, about how hard it is to hold a public life together when inside everything is falling apart. And that's when an uncomfortable idea appears. Being strong doesn't always mean going on. Sometimes being strong means accepting that you can't anymore. Before we move on, let's look at 3 turning points in her career. 1. She cancels tours at the peak of her success because of health issues. For many, it's impossible to understand. For her, it's absolutely necessary. 2. She starts stepping away from the industry's frantic pace, even if that means losing visibility and relevance. 3. She decides to tell her story on her own terms, speaking openly about what used to be hidden: illness, anxiety, fear, and fragility. After years of living in survival mode, Selena starts to take a different path. Less noise, more control, more boundaries. It is not a clean break from the past. It is a process, slow, irregular, sometimes full of doubt. She begins to choose more carefully which projects to accept. She gets more involved in creative decisions. She looks for spaces where not everything is exposure, pressure, and other people's expectations. She creates her own brand. She starts building something that does not depend only on her image as a celebrity, but also on her own judgment and her identity. It is no longer just about being everywhere. It is about being where it actually makes sense to be. There is no classic, triumphant comeback. There is no perfect redemption narrative. There is something more real instead. An imperfect reconstruction, sometimes quiet, sometimes contradictory. She is still famous, she is still being watched, she is still in the headlines, but something changes underneath. She no longer seems willing to pay any price just to stay at the center. For the first time in a long time, the priority is not the character, it is the person underneath. In recent years, Selena has appeared in the headlines again because of her personal life. This time, because of her relationship with a producer closely linked to Justin Bieber's world, a choice that, for many, sounds almost ironic, for others, provocative, and for her, simply part of a different stage, one where she tries to choose from another place far from the noise and the old ghosts. Today, Selena Gomez no longer fully fits into the mold of a traditional pop star. Not into the Disney girl image either. Not into the idea of a perfect celebrity. Her image is no longer that of a simple product. It is the image of someone who carries a heavy story, of complicated love, of early fame, of illness, of constant pressure, and of an exposure she never fully asked for. Sometimes she appears strong, sometimes vulnerable, sometimes confident, sometimes clearly exhausted. She does not build a story of total victory. She does not try to convince the world that everything is fine. What she shows is something more ambiguous and more human, a person who is still learning how to live with her own story. And she is also someone who, for the first time, seems to be trying to live by her own rules, choosing who to be with, what to show, what to keep, when to stop. Not always in a neat way, not always without contradictions, but with a clear intention, never to lose herself again inside the character the world created for her. Selena Gomez's story is not just the story of a pop star. It is the story of what happens when someone grows up under the spotlight without time to learn how to protect herself. Of what happens when love, fame, and pressure mix too early. And of how hard it is to rebuild yourself when all of that collapses in public. Because sometimes the greatest success can also become the heaviest burden. This was Behind the Icon, and this was the story of Selena Gomez. If you like this kind of stories, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which story you'd like us to tell in the next episode.